The year is 1921, and the song I Ain't Got Nobody by Marion Harris was on the charts for 10 weeks. The song would later be covered by Louis Prima in 1956, and again by David Lee Roth in 1985. Now also in 1921, Albert Einstein was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for his work on the photoelectric effect, which was crucial in developing quantum theory. Now, Albert never won the Nobel Prize for the thing he's most famous for, his theory of relativity. Now finally, on July 1st, 1921, President Warren G. Harding established the General Accounting Office, whose purpose was to ensure proper federal spending, including investigating fraud, waste, and inefficiencies. That's right, the so-called Department of Government Efficiencies has been in existence since 1921, finding and saving billions in tax dollars every year. Today we're going to talk to someone who spent 16 years at the GAO and learn more about what this important organization does. This is Sunday Money.
Sunday morning, I'm feeling fly. Walking down the street, head held.
Okay, so I'm here with the former Managing Director of Public Affairs at the GAO, Chuck Young. How are you, Chuck?
Good. How you doing, Phil? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So my first question is what is the GAO?
Sure. Well, the GAO is the Government Accountability Office. And when you say that to people, they're like, oh, there's actually accountability? Yeah, there is. We are and I've retired, so I'm speaking for myself now, but I worked there for a long time. And what we are basically is a nonpartisan, fact-based group of auditors that work for the Congress, both sides, Republicans, Democrats, and look at government programs. How are they working? Are they working the way they're supposed to? Could we save money? Could we do it better? And that's what GAO has done since, it was founded in 1921, but it's changed over the years, but that's what GAO does.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And it kind of blew me away too, because I was telling you offline that my mom worked at NIH for years and also had no idea what the GAO was.
Yeah.
But
Well,
how did you get involved? Like, you were at Congress before?
yeah, I worked for a member of Congress as the chief of staff over there. And so I knew well Congress's role. I was also a former reporter, so I covered government and had this opportunity to do sort of both at GAO's communications, but also communications for the agency that worked for the Congress. As in journalism for mainstream media, you try to be fact-based, nonpartisan, and that's exactly what GAO is. It's about the facts. Where are the facts going to lead us? Because GAO will do work at the request of Republicans or at the request of Democrats in the Congress or independents, and everybody's treated exactly the same. There's a very specific process that all the audits follow to ensure that they are not partisan in any way, to ensure that it's not influenced by outside events. And GAO has been doing this. It started, as you said, a long time ago. And initially, you know what it was? It was the bookkeepers for the government. That's what it was in 1921 when it started. But particularly in the 1960s and 70s, post-World War II, government rule expanded. GAO's role changed to not just look at the numbers, but to look at how effective are the programs and can money be saved or is there waste? And that really grew to be GAO's primary mission. We still look at financial issues, and GAO these days probably has about 10% of its employee workforce are CPAs, but the rest are analysts looking at government programs across the board.
Yeah, and I watched some of the recent hearings with the GAO before Congress, and I noticed the one riding theme is that there's really thoughtful analysis of everything and careful consideration of what to do, which is it's a smart way to approach it. And yet, so many people don't even, like me, don't even know it exists. And yet, like you said, since the 1920s, it's been around. So
Yeah.
what do you think the organization can do to just sort of like spread the word more than anything?
Well, that's been the burning question for me since took this position before I retired. I did it for 16 years, and it was how do we get the message out about what we do and how fact-based and nonpartisan it is. And certainly, within DC, we do the work directly for the members of Congress, and they know that as a result of our recommendations, we do all these reports looking at how things can be improved. And there's always recommendations about how to improve the program so it's more effective or how to save money. And as a result of those recommendations, Congress usually takes them a while, but over a 4 or 5 year period, about 80% of them get implemented. And as a result of that, GAO's return on investment, for every dollar that the federal government spends on GAO, they get $76 back.
Wow.
Because of all these recommendations, many of which get implemented by the Congress, it's a tremendous value for the government. And so, we certainly, congressional hearings, we testify at a lot of them about the recommendations. And that's one platform. In this media age, 24/7 incoming information and what's fact and what's fiction, then it's more of a challenge. So that's why, the social media we've expanded into. When I was there, we began to do more, as you're doing, with video on YouTube or through other channels, and trying to, since back when I went to school, it was the mass media, right? And there were only a few outlets, and that blew up. And now you have media on so many different channels and people getting their news in so many different ways. What we try to do is get onto each of those. So if people are interested in accountability, what is the government doing? How can it improve? We're out there with information because we have recommendations that are that haven't been implemented. One thing that the GAO does every 2 years is they produce something called the high-risk list.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and that's a list of areas that are at high risk for waste, fraud, abuse, or mismanagement. So it's really sort of a to-do list for the Congress and the agencies to say, hey, here's areas where we can save money, where we can improve, where we can get a better return for the taxpayer. And as a result, like in the past year, I think there was, maybe it's over the past 2 years, we outlined $84 billion in savings that so there's a lot that could be continued to be done in these areas that we've outlined and that we update every 2 years. And you get years where sometimes the committees are very focused on it and a lot of things get implemented, other years not so much, but we've been producing it since the late 90s.
Yeah, I've seen that list, and I'll put a link to it on when we post this interview. It's really pretty amazing when you look at it, because I also, like everybody, see what happens on social media or how things are promoted as being problematic. And like in my case, the things that were being attacked recently weren't even on the list, the high risk list. And I was like, if somebody just looked at the high risk list, they would, and you're looking for some big savings, and GAO did your work for you already, and there it is. And yet it just got no coverage whatsoever. I just sort of stumbled on it.
Yeah, it's difficult in this news environment. You have to, and I'm a former reporter, as I said, and there's so much happening, right? There's so many things going on and news staff have been reduced so much. So there are fewer reporters covering Washington, and they have more to cover. And so a lot of this gets lost.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So you were there for about 16 years, is that right?
16 years, and worked for the Congress before that. And it's always a struggle to get the story told. But the thing that really surprised me when I joined was you have these incredibly talented, smart people who have graduated from leading schools in the country who are doing the legwork. They're auditors and analysts. It's a very thorough review process. So somebody has to, every audit that is produced at GAO has somebody looking over the shoulder who had nothing to do with that audit to make sure it followed the proper procedures to ensure that it is nonpartisan and fact-based. And so very smart people doing very issue-oriented, labor-intensive, very detailed work, and issuing, reports. And it's always the challenge is how do you get more attention for those reports? And the key is the recommendations. How do you get them implemented?
So when you said that Congress can ask for you to do an audit on something, or ask the GAO to do an audit on something, is that generally how it works? Congress says, "Hey, take a look at the Navy or take a look at the Army," or that
Yeah,
kind of
there's a
thing.
couple of different ways. The first way is exactly that. So if you're the chairman of a committee, or so in this case, because the Republicans control the House and the Senate, those would be Republicans. Or if you're the ranking member, that would be the Democrats on those committee. Either one, as long as it's in your jurisdiction, you can ask GAO to do work on it, to look at it, and GAO would do the work. The other way is Congress can write into legislation, we want a GAO report on
Hmm.
XYZ. So if you remember, like in the financial crisis in 2008, after that, there was the Dodd-Frank legislation, which tried to fix a lot of the problems that were brought about by the financial crisis. There were about 50 different mandated studies by GAO in that legislation. So Congress can ask for it, or they can put it into law, and then we would do the work.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And then as far as like interfacing with the different agencies, do they like my example of going to the Navy, is there ever any pushback? You say, oh, these auditors are coming in from the GAO. Is it we have to open the books for them? They're cool with
Right.
that, or
Yeah. Now, sometimes they're not happy about that, and sometimes there has to be some negotiation to ensure that GAO needs access to the information that's required to do the audit. So typically, what would happen then is if there was, a lot of the agencies, particularly when they have people there who have been there and dealt with GAO for a long time, they know GAO protects the information. They know GAO has a process in place. So there's a comfort level. But, every 4 or 8 years, you get turnover. New people come in and don't know GAO as well. We explain the process. And what happens sometimes is there is pushback and they say, we don't want to provide this information. We're not giving it to you, GAO. Then Congress might get involved because they requested the work, right? And they say to the agency, you need to respond to this, or you'll have problems with us. And then it gets better. But there was a lawsuit around access years ago. The comptroller general of the United States is the head of the GAO, and the comptroller general at the time was trying to get information about Vice President Cheney and and an energy task force he had, and they didn't want to turn it over, and it went to court. But that's extremely rare. I mean, for the most part, GAO gets access to the data that it needs.
yeah, that's good to hear. I would imagine it's just human nature. You got some stranger. What do you want to look at my work? My
Yeah,
work's perfect.
nobody likes to have somebody looking over their shoulder and double
Right.
checking, make sure they're doing it exactly as they're supposed to. So
Yeah. Well, this has been an incredible conversation. I really appreciate you coming on and explaining the GAO. Are there other links besides that risk list that I can post on the video that you'd recommend?
yeah, the main website, gao.gov. If anybody is interested in, has GAO ever looked at A, B, or C, they can go to gao.gov and take a look at that. The part about, I think fraud and waste is an important one. If people want to look at that, GAO has done an estimate on fraud across the federal government, and it's about 3 to 7% of total expenditures. A lot of people think, oh, fraud is a huge amount of what they got, 3 to 7%. Now that's still billions of dollars, right? Somewhere between around 200 and 500 billion. And so that has to be addressed. But to give you some perspective on that too, it's between 5 and 7% of the total federal expenditures. So you could look at fraud issues, and there's also one that I would recommend, the fiscal health of the nation, which is very relevant right now. And this is going back before the current administration is, there's concern about the debt and paying the government paying interest on the debt. And we're at a point now where interest rates may go up again, given what's happening on Wall Street. And if that happens, we're all going to pay more, right? For every time we try to buy a car or buy a house, and that's not sustainable. I think what GAO has said, the current trajectory we're on is not really fiscally sustainable. The government's going to have to figure out both how to cut and how to raise revenue, because both have to be done. Otherwise, the further we go down the road without addressing the debt issue, the bigger problem it's going to be for our kids and grandkids.
And so is that part of the GAO website, the fiscal
Yeah,
health?
it's called Fiscal Health. If you go to the GAO website and put in the Fiscal Health report, it comes out every year and outlines those issues.
Oh, that's great. I've also been looking at Steve Ballmer's, I think it's called USA Facts, which looks like
Yes.
they're using some of the same data.
Yeah, he came and met with us at GAO when he started that effort, and so we shared with him a lot of the information that we developed over the years, because that's a good effort as well.
Yeah, that's great. I'll include it. It has good graphics. Nice and
Yes, yes, you can
simple.
tell the story very well with images. So
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, and I'll put lots of links below, and I appreciate it.
thank you, Phil. Thanks for having me on.